I have the pleasure, I suppose, now of speaking in the middle of the afternoon when everyone's starting to feel a little bit tired, perhaps. And so I thought I'd start just with a question for you all. And at the risk of eating into my time a little bit, if you could just take a minute, reflect on what brought you here today, and just take 20 seconds and share with somebody nearby. I warn you, I'm going to interrupt you. Just turn around, go ahead. If you can't come up with why you came here today, just say what got you up this morning. Maybe it was the coffee, the food. Turn around, go ahead. Take 20 seconds. Share with your neighbor. What brought you here today? Okay, make sure you switch. Let the other person have a chance. Okay, I warned you I would interrupt you right when it's starting to get good. I anticipate this is the energy you get in the coffee break. You know, you're engaging with everyone. How do you feel right now? Do you feel a little more alive maybe than you did a few minutes ago or before the exercise? Yes, okay. If so, you got the whole point. There's nothing more that you need from me today. This is what I'd like to explore for the next few minutes, the idea that human energy is just what you experienced right there, that feeling of being alive. But the question is this just a metaphor? And of course, Teilhard de Chardin was the one who developed this term. He referred to human energy as a physical, organic, even moral force, described that human energy as beneath this turbulent power, which is nevertheless well known to be the inspirer of genius, the arts, and all poetry, a formidable creative urge lies in reserve. And that creative urge, what's in reserve, that's what I'll be focusing on. So this project has its origins with human energy and the work that we've been doing to explore the biological nature of the noosphere. Is it a unified living system? And it's occurred to me with my teammates in working on this project that perhaps we were maybe getting a little too conceptual, a little too abstract in focusing on the noosphere biologically, that we needed to find a way to think about our own experience, human experience. Can we actually experience our connection to the noosphere? And as a result of that, can that help us to consciously evolve the noosphere? And I think in order to understand this, we need to understand the role of human energy and how it works. Following the words of Teilhard, I will say that human energy underpins the relationship between our individual lives and the noosphere. And I'm going to paint it in two total extremes, but to make the point that we could view our role as individuals sort of like algorithms in a massive machine, that society is just this giant computer, and this gives us what we've been talking about so far at the conference and at Human Energy, this idea of the techno-social dilemma. It leaves us with this meaning crisis. What is meaningful? What is value if we're all just ones and zeros and bits? What I would say is this vision is lacking in human energy. Can we instead consider a more organic vision of the noosphere, one where we see our role as individuals, as creative, evolving, sentient, contributing to what we've been calling the third story? I think in order to understand this, it really hinges on our definition of what it means to be alive. So the radical hypothesis, I would say, of human energy is that when we feel metaphorically alive, the noosphere is biologically alive. What could I possibly mean by this? Well, human energy describes a sort of meta-level aliveness of flourishing, what Teilhard called the zest for life. This actually is not so much of a surprise. Life is always about more than just mere survival, more than just being alive, but is the ability to create and adapt. This is the basis of what evolutionary theorists refer to as evolvability. Evolvability is the capacity to enhance one's very own evolution. In the words of scholar Rachel Brown, we have jettisoned the perspective that evolution is a random process. We must instead emphasize a generic capacity for evolvability that can influence the outcomes of evolution. In other words, this living systems, life, evolution uses creative energy in reserve to increasingly complexify and increase in its scale of aliveness. Where does this creative energy for evolution come from? What I'll explore now over the next few slides is the idea that biology leverages serendipitous, synchronistic interactions to yield creative innovation, our very creativity. And this will occur across cells to brains, and I will briefly explore human energy in the noosphere. So I use the word metabolism. I hope I don't scare you all away. Perhaps that will invoke this image of one of these biochemical diagrams that you had to study if you ever took biochemistry. Of course, that is what our energy is, these pathways, and of course, it's massively, hopelessly complex. This is what complexity theorists often refer to as an autopoietic system. These chemicals is what enables a cell to create itself. These are the metabolic networks. But there's a surprise here. This is really just a fraction of what we know of the actual chemistry that occurs in a cell. Well, what else could be possibly going on than all of this? Well, as it turns out, no enzyme is perfect, no enzyme that catalyzes these reactions. There are a host of myriad side products that have the potential in the background to interact with each other. And this is part of the serendipity that I'll be pointing to. Biochemists refer to this cell as the cellular dark energy. Dark because they don't know what it is. 30 to 90%, this very wide range of metabolites, have no known function for a cell. How could this be? Is this just waste products? Or is this the source of plasticity, of adaptation, of metabolic changes that might occur within a cell? In the words of biochemist Nota Garcia, this pathway evolution is actually initiated from latent, underground reactions from so-called promiscuous enzymes in the cell. That is the very underground activity. These side products is where new creative innovations come from a cell. And this is the basis for evolvability. That is the capacity of the cell, of an organism, to increase the probability of an evolutionary outcome in the future. This is what I would say is the meta-aliveness, that higher level aliveness beyond just survival, to creatively explore new spaces. And in a story I don't have time to tell, it is this meta-aliveness of a cell that creates the capacity, the possibility of multicellular life that we know today in more complex organisms. Okay, if creative cells is too much for you, how about the brain? We saw earlier the organ of our creativity. We know it is carefully networked, the sensory organs and the perceptual motor networks, cognitive networks. Well, the same thing occurs in the brain. There are all of these reactions between the networks, connectivity that is not based on the standard wiring diagram. Not surprisingly, when we don't understand it, as scientists refer to it as dark energy. Neuroscientists refer to this as the brain's dark energy. In fact, something like 30 to 60% of the metabolism of the brain is dedicated to so-called spontaneous activity. Well, is this just background noise? Or perhaps, like the cell's ability to evolve new pathways, is this a source of generative change and neuroplasticity? And in fact, I think it is the latter. Spontaneous activity, we've come to learn, it's like an evolutionary process. Neuroscientists refer to this as a microevolutionary process, that as activity moves through the brain, the signals are shaped as they emerge in consciousness. It's a selection, a balance between this creative process and selection, just like as in evolution. This allows the brain to have control over its own plasticity, metaplasticity, just like evolvability, then becomes the capacity of the brain to increase the probability of a behavioral outcome in the future for the organism. This is the meta-aliveness of the brain, not merely its ability to process the standard information, but to creatively come up with new ideas. And another story I won't have time to share, it is this creative metaplasticity, meta-aliveness of our brains that has allowed us to complexify as a species socially. So thus far, I hope I've at least given some sense that cells and brains utilize this creative energy in reserve to move beyond their standard diagram, their standard model. But what about experience, conscious evolution? Here, I'm going to ask you to take a little bit of a conceptual leap. That is, if we are to, as we know, our brain is the very organ that is our organ of experience. And if our brain operates through this microevolutionary process, might it be that we are experiencing evolution? That our very experience, what we go through on a day-to-day basis, is something like what it's like to evolve. In fact, neuroscientist Terry Deacon, who unfortunately could not be with us here this week, describes it just this way. He says, the experience of being sentient is what it feels like to be evolution. I think this is a radically Teilhardian ontology of evolution. It's what we are, an experience of the unfolding story of increasing aliveness, but as we experience it as sentient beings through our brains. So now to bring that to the noosphere. So now it's a level up. I would riff off of Terry's phrase and say, to experience human energy, the experience of human energy, is what it feels like to be the noosphere becoming alive. That is, the noosphere is a natural extension of this evolutionary layering of increasing complexity and aliveness. But as humans, we are not only sentient, but we are sentient of sentience. We know that we know. So this creates a new layer of meta-aliveness. And unlike the enzyme in the chemical reaction or the neuron in the brain, as humans, we have the capacity to imagine what is possible. But I think in order to understand the role of this creative energy, of human energy in humanity, we have to look beyond our social connections and social networks, which of course is true, but to look to the more imaginative, serendipitous, synchronistic interactions, the exchanges we're having in the coffee breaks that are occurring outside of the standard networks that we live in. So I'll ask the question, are we the noosphere's dark energy, our source of creativity? Well, we sure spend a large fraction of our time in social and creative efforts that are well beyond what's necessary just for survival. Is this just meaningless play, or is this the source of our social and technological innovation? I think everyone here knows that this is where the creativity comes from, that our imagination drives human evolution, that innovations that shape the future of humanity. So now I'm going to link, and I've used perhaps one too many different terms today, but conscious evolution, evolvability, metaplasticity, these are all the same ideas. The capacity to increase the probability of an outcome through evolution. So this is not just randomness, but can we generically direct where evolution is going? So for us, conscious evolution is the capacity of the noosphere to increase the probability of a planetary outcome for the future. In this way, our meta-aliveness, where we are most feeling alive metaphorically, is where the noosphere is born, where it becomes alive. But what's with all this darkness, Scientists, if we don't know something, we call it dark. But I think that's precisely right, because we don't know what the future holds. We don't know what we are evolving toward. These terms, they represent the ability of organisms to just increase the probability somehow in evolution. And if so, then how could we consciously evolve? Do we have any hope to direct this if we don't know where it's going? This is where I think we have to step out and outside of science and yet retain some science. So I'm going to try something a little impossible. But to put the poetry back into autopoiesis. That we need to embrace the darkness. This is a dark creativity. It's what the poet Keats referred to as negative capability. Negative capability is the capacity of being in uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. This may sound crazy, but I think this is the basis of perhaps where the next talk will go, the conversation about awe and wonder, transcendence. We have to be open to and not know what's going on. Or in the words of the poet T.S. Eliot, I said to my soul, be still and wait without hope. For hope would be hope for the wrong thing. Wait without love, for love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and the love are all in the waiting. Wait without thought, for you are not ready for thought. So the darkness shall be the light, and the stillness the dancing. In other words, there's no biochemistry, there's no physiology that I can articulate that would explain this in any other way than these great poets. Okay. So I'm getting towards the end here. I think Teilhard was pointing us towards something in his shared physical, biology, and moral connection, that we need to build a bridge between biology, the sciences, and the humanities. And I'll point one other synchronicity. The great scholar of the Muslim world, Ibn Arabi, nearly a century ago, was talking about creative imagination, teaching at a university not far from here in Fez, and talked about the importance not only of imagination, but the creative evolving. He did not use the word evolution, but saw that knowledge was layering one after the next. And he emphasized the centrality of experience, of human experience in that knowledge. So, words of caution. I recognize here that human energy may be boundless, but our ecosystems are not. I am not trying to propose a spiritual bypass into the realm of transcendent mystery exclusively. We must be aware. But we cannot also fall prey to what the scholar Jeffrey Kripal calls moral bypass, which would be to ignore the transcendent, our creative transcendence, and stifle our human energy. I think we need transdisciplinary studies of creativity, compassion, and ethics. And in the next talk, my colleague Parham Portavood will talk a little bit about thinking how technology and AI may help with us in this bridge. So in summary, life is about more than just being alive. It is about increasing the probability of further evolution through creative discovery. That when we experience aliveness metaphorically, the noosphere may be becoming alive. We may be birthing the noosphere as an organism. And conscious evolution must include, we must bridge these paths of science, poetry, and darkness. Thank you. This is dedicated, of course, to Ben Kassira, who was just, so many of his ideas are woven throughout this, that he planted the seed for this work. So I'm forever indebted to him and all of my collaborators and colleagues through Human Energy. Thank you very much.